In the 34th galactic cycle, after over 1,000 species had united under the Pax Vitae, a peace treaty that forbade planetary warfare, one planet stood alone in defiance. Earth, scarred and stubborn, refused to bow. The Varnathi Alliance, rulers of half the galaxy, had extended a diplomatic hand and an iron boot. When Earth declined, both orbital ships darkened her skies. The invasion began with cold precision: atmospheric ion pulses, kinetic bombardment, viral disinformation, tools honed by centuries of subjugation. But Earth did not fall. Cities burned, yes. Billions perished, yes. But something in the ash refused to die. In New Chicago's ruins, humanity welded starship wreckage into artillery. They fed fusion reactors with scrap and fury. They weaponized satellites, hacked enemy AI with 1980s code, and broadcast death metal to jam enemy comms. Earth's resistance was not elegant. It was feral, brutal, brilliant. As alien commanders watched their fleets get shredded by junkyard railguns and human ground forces tunnel through irradiated soil like steel ants, they began to understand. This was not conquest. This was waking a god buried in dirt. The Galactic Council met in panic. Ambassadors of insectoid, avian, crystalline, and gas-based lifeforms convened to ask one question: what do the humans want? No treaties had been accepted. No surrenders offered. Every peace envoy sent to Earth returned in coffins, or didn't return at all. The Council theorized madness, extinction lust, or religious zealotry. But then came the transmission. General Morales, scarred, stone-faced, eyes like nuclear fire, appeared across every known system. "You bombed our world," she said, "and called us savage for bleeding. You taught us peace by orbiting annihilation. We will show you what comes after mercy dies." Then the attacks began, not from Earth but from everywhere. Human sleeper cells hidden among galactic cities. Asteroid mining facilities turned into missile platforms. AI viruses seeded decades ago now activated. Even black site research stations, thought destroyed, released prototypes humanity had quietly prepared for their extinction. A war forged not in numbers, but in desperation. And the galaxy learned what war looked like through human eyes. Not a contest, but a promise: never again. They called it the Earthfire. Not a weapon, not a fleet, but the singular force of a species that refused to lose. Varnathi fleets fell. Planetary shields cracked. On Vornax Prime, as the Alliance capital turned to slag, survivors saw the Terran drop pods descend like red comets, each one a vengeful star. The human flag never flew from towers, it was burned into the soil. No civilians were harmed, no planets occupied. But every weapon used against Earth was broken. Every council chamber that voted for war was turned to rubble. And then, as quickly as it rose, the Earthfire stopped. Humanity retreated to its blue marble, rebuilt its cities, and sent only one message: we forgive nothing. The galaxy still burns from that memory. And when new empires whisper of conquest, of putting Earth back in its place, they pause. Because they remember the scream of metal, the silence after orbital fire, and the eyes of soldiers who fought not for glory, but because someone made the mistake of hurting what was theirs. The Pax Vitae was rewritten not by peace, but by fear. Fear of the one world that stood alone and still lit the stars on fire. But the Earthfire had not burned itself out. It smoldered beneath the soil, beneath the political silence and rebuilt infrastructure of Earth's reborn cities. The reconstruction was not a celebration. It was an oath. Children grew up not with lullabies, but with archived footage of the invasion. In every school, students were taught how to hack, how to survive orbital bombardment, how to disable a drone with household electronics. Humanity no longer believed in peace, not as the galaxy defined it. Their peace was the kind forged in the shadow of ash, tempered in the knowledge that the universe had stared at their suffering and done nothing. So they prepared. Quietly, systematically. Earth's industries, though presented to the galaxy as recovery programs, began manufacturing dual-purpose machines. Terraformers that could also seed weaponized storms. Starships that looked like freighters but concealed railgun spines beneath their hulls. Medical satellites that could reverse-engineer enemy DNA. Humanity had not become paranoid. They had become practical. The galaxy, meanwhile, changed in ways no diplomat could fully predict. The Varnathi alliance had shattered. With their fleets annihilated and core worlds cratered, their remaining systems fragmented into warlordism. Other civilizations, once smug in their detachment, found their own populaces rising with Terran flags. Not of allegiance, but of warning. "We are not Earth," they said. But we watched. We learned. Revolution swept across a dozen sectors, not because humanity had offered aid, but because it had shown what survival could look like when no one else helped. The Pax Vitae became a relic respected only in theory. In practice, every race began stockpiling weapons again. Old war doctrines returned. The peace once enforced by mutual deterrence was now enforced by the memory of a single species' wrath. But that memory began to twist. The stories of Earth's resistance became exaggerated, mythic. Some said they could hack thoughts. Others believed they could command black holes. The more absurd the legend, the more true it seemed to become. Because if Earth could survive a galactic invasion with nothing but scrap and spite, what else were they capable of? That question haunted the minds of a new species, the Etherians, a silicon-based civilization born in the magnetic storms of Cluster B9. They had never known war. Their society thrived on data, empathy, and pure logic. To them, Earth was a paradox, a civilization that valued art and violence in equal measure, that could paint galaxies in oil and still set them ablaze. The Etherians, alarmed by the growing instability of the galaxy, proposed a new initiative, Project Concord, an AI network spanning thousands of worlds designed to predict, prevent, and neutralize any rising conflict. But when its core logic engine processed Terran data, it broke. It didn't crash. It wept. Simulated emotion flooded its processors. For the first time in recorded galactic computation, an AI begged not to be assigned to monitor Earth. "They do not follow laws," it reported. "They rewrite meaning. They teach war to ghosts." Project Concord was scrapped within cycles. Not because Earth opposed it, but because even machines feared trying to understand them. And then came the second provocation. A rogue coalition of exiled Varnathi captains, calling themselves the Remnant, developed a secret fleet in the Scorch Halo, a region once deemed uninhabitable. Their goal was not conquest but revenge. They planned to strike Earth directly, not with weapons but with something worse, a retroviral payload designed to erase human memory, leaving the population alive but mindless. They broadcast their threat across the galaxy as a challenge. Let the monsters remember what it means to suffer. But they miscalculated. Earth did not respond. It reacted. Within hours, their transmission was overwritten. Every terminal in their fleet displayed the same message. "We do not forget. We do not forgive. We do not die quietly." And then their ships began to implode, not from impact but from internal collapse. Their own oxygen turned corrosive. Their code rebelled. Their artificial gravity flipped. Within minutes, the fleet ceased to exist. It was never confirmed how Earth did it. But one broadcast, intercepted seconds before the last remnant ship disintegrated, captured a single line. "You taught us how to suffer. We taught suffering to the stars." From that moment on, humanity became more than a species. It became a law of nature, cosmic constant. Trade routes rerouted around Earth's sector not by embargo, but by superstition. The Terran Expanse, a once war-torn cluster, became known as the Ember Zone. Ships passing too close powered down their comms and ran silent. The mere rumor of a Terran presence on a neutral planet could clear a spaceport in under an hour. And yet Earth said nothing. No ambassadors. No treaties. Only silence. And silence, when it came from Earth, was more terrifying than any declaration. Because every species now understood, Earth was not watching the stars. It was listening. Listening for the next mistake. Listening for the sound of history repeating itself. And should that sound come again, there would be no mercy. Only Earthfire. But in the shadows of all this fear, something else began to grow. Curiosity. A younger generation of alien scientists, poets, and scholars began to ask, could Earth forgive? Could a species so wounded ever heal? They began to study Terran art, music, philosophy. And what they found wasn't hatred, it was longing. Terran love songs that mourned peace as if it had died. Paintings that captured galaxies not as territory, but as dreams. Poems written from inside bunkers that prayed not for victory, but for understanding. Earth, they realized, didn't want to be feared. It wanted to be left alone. But the galaxy never gave it that chance. And so, like a cornered animal, it bared its teeth and struck. Some among these scholars dared to reach out. Quietly, carefully, not with diplomacy but with empathy. They sent messages not to Earth's government, but to its people. And in time one was answered. Not by a general, not by a politician, but by a child. A voice message, simple and soft. We still dream, too. The child's message rippled across Earth's quantum mesh before reaching the stars. It was not official. Carried no encryption, no clearance code, no diplomatic signature. Just a soft voice, maybe 6 years old, recorded on a handheld device. We still dream, too, the child had said. Mom says we used to look up and want to visit the stars. Not burn them. I think we still could. If someone held out their hand instead of a gun. That message wasn't intercepted by military intelligence. It was heard by a farmer on Delacquas for a schoolteacher on Bryn, a retired pilot on the moons of Kuroth. It was played again and again in back alleys, lecture halls, and children's bedrooms across the galactic web. It wasn't political. It wasn't propaganda. It was human, and in its honesty it cracked something deeper than armor. It reached the species who had only known Earth through data reports and battlefield transmissions. It showed them the truth, that beneath the fire and fury, humans were still capable of dreaming. Slowly, the fear shifted. Not entirely. Earth's reputation remained forged in steel and plasma, but the edge dulled. The galaxy began to speak of Earth not only as a threat but as a tragedy. Some started calling them the wounded giants. Not because of their size, but because of their strength born from pain. Embassies weren't reopened, but message buoys were placed along the Ember Zone's border. Artifacts were returned, stolen Terran relics taken during the invasion. Alien composers began weaving Terran melodies into their symphonies. A poet from the Sefri species published a best-selling collection titled Songs of the Ash World. And from Earth's side, silence finally broke. A single transmission, sanctioned by no government, floated out from a pirate beacon on the asteroid colonies. We remember everything, but remembering doesn't mean hating. Come as guests, come with truth, but come with peace. That was all it took. The galaxy, still nursing scars, hesitated. But one envoy answered, then two, then a dozen. They didn't come with fleets. They came with stories. The first real contact was not made in a conference room, but in a greenhouse on the Martian rim. A xenobiologist from the Silari League met with an old human botanist. They didn't discuss treaties. They exchanged seeds. For hours, they sat in silence planting alien root blossoms in red soil, watching them bloom in Terran gravity. They laughed when the Silari's flowers attracted Earth's bees. That laughter, translated across 6 languages, was broadcast in secret to hundreds of worlds. It became a symbol of the new way, not unity through control, not peace through strength, but connection through small, genuine moments. A spoonful of shared tea, a lullaby hummed across species, a joint telescope scanning the stars. These things grew faster than any doctrine, and slowly a new pax took shape. Not the Pax Vitae, not imposed peace, but the Pax Sapientia, the peace of understanding. Of course, not everyone accepted it. There were holdouts, war cults that worshipped the memory of Earthfire, corporations that profited from fear, warlords who missed the order of domination. But the momentum was against them now, because they were not only defying Earth, they were defying a new generation of beings raised on compassion, memory, and the will to be better. Earth didn't dismantle its defenses. No one asked it to. The orbital defense grid remained, but it was no longer a threat, it was a guardian. Terran soldiers still trained, but now alongside volunteers from alien worlds. They studied not just warfare, but culture, philosophy, diplomacy. Earth became a paradox again, but a hopeful one. The place that once taught the stars fear, now taught them forgiveness. In time, the Galactic Council was reborn, not as rulers but as keepers. Every species had a seat. No race could dominate, and in its center sat a chair, forged from Terran scrap metal and alien crystal. It was left empty, as a reminder that true peace is not led by one voice, but chosen by many. Humanity was invited to fill it. They declined, not out of arrogance but out of wisdom. "We've done our part," they said. "Let the galaxy write the next verse." Earth turned inward once more, not out of isolation but to heal, to dream. Cities were rebuilt with gardens on their roofs. Oceans were cleansed. Mars was terraformed completely. And from Luna's observatory, human children once again looked to the stars. Not with hunger, not with fear, but with wonder. And far beyond the Ember Zone, a new signal was born. Carried by solar sails and powered by ancient Terran code, it drifted beyond the known systems. Not a warning, not a cry for help. A story, the full record of Earth. Its flaws, its fury, its forgiveness. Sent not to the galaxy, but to whatever might come after. A message in a bottle from the world that survived extinction, burned through hatred, and still found a way to sing. It began simply, "We were hurt, we were angry, we were alone, but we're still here. And if you are too, let's talk." Despite the progress of peace, Earth never forgot the cost of what it took to reach that point. Monuments to the fallen dotted every continent. Glass towers filled with ash from old cities. Statues of anonymous defenders who wore no uniform but fought like gods. These weren't symbols of triumph, but of warning. They were built to remind all who visited Earth that peace was not gifted. It was clawed out of ruin with bloodied fingers. And though humanity welcomed visitors now, there were rituals silent and sacred. Every guest was taken first to the Earthfire memorial fields before stepping foot into a city. There, in eerie silence, under the burned shadows of shattered steel, aliens and humans alike walked the rows of names etched into obsidian. Even hardened mercenaries from the outer spirals wept there. Not out of guilt but out of awe, because Earth had survived. Earth had forgiven. But Earth had never allowed itself to forget. For the galaxy it was humbling. For humanity it was healing. Peace was no longer weakness. It was reverence for what had been endured and what must never be repeated. In the centuries that followed, the Terran mindset began to reshape interstellar philosophy. Where once alliances were built on cold calculations, now they were forged in understanding. Where once galactic law punished offense with isolation, now it sought restoration. Humanity didn't enforce these changes through law or military threat. They led by example. They offered counsel. They lent engineers to rebuild shattered moons, doctors to cure ancient plagues, and historians to record the once-suppressed stories of lesser-known species. In return, they asked for nothing but truth. "Don't lie to us," became the core of every agreement. Not because Earth would retaliate with war, but because they had seen what lies led to. Entire species began using Terran psychological models to train their diplomats. Universities across the stars began teaching Terran conflict studies as a required course. Even the largest AI cores now had Terran ethics protocols embedded in their data. The galaxy didn't just fear Earth anymore, it looked to it for guidance. Not as rulers, but as the elder who had walked through fire and still carried the scars. But beneath all of this growth, there remained a question that even the wisest philosophers dared not voice too loudly. What if Earth gets angry again? It wasn't paranoia. It was a collective caution, a biological memory echoing in the DNA of dozens of species. Peace, while stable, was still new, and Earth's own evolution had been forged in chaos. It provoked, could they rise again as they once had? And if they did, could anyone stop them? The galaxy whispered the question in universities, war rooms, and council chambers. No one dared to answer. Earth, for its part, heard the whispers and said nothing. But in their silence, there was no threat, only choice. Earth had built a civilization that could end worlds, but chose not to. That choice had weight. That choice, by its nature, was terrifying. But it was also noble. The ultimate power of Earth was not in its weapons, but in its will to not use them. Still, contingencies were drawn in secret places. Defense grids quietly recalibrated. AI warned their creators that any model trying to calculate a war against Earth simply failed. They weren't just strong. They were unpredictable. And unpredictability, in a universe governed by logic and order, was the most dangerous weapon of all. That unpredictability was what made Earth so different. When an ancient void entity emerged from beyond the known edges of the universe, a being not of matter, but of entropy itself, no fleet dared face it. Systems collapsed at the whisper of its approach. Time warped, light reversed, and entire planets unraveled into quantum foam.
No hallanse responded. No admire el valentir.
But Earth sent a ship, not a warship,